Welcome to our three-part India travel series where we explore the incredible journey of our guest Shane as he embarks on a mesmerizing trip across India. In this first part, we'll dive into what were Shane's expectations before he came to India, what were his first impressions when he reached, and the journey he took through the incredible destinations of Mumbai, Rajasthan, and Agra. From the bustling cityscapes to majestic palaces, Shane had a truly memorable India trip. Let's find out how this unforgettable adventure started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Trip 101 Travel Talk series. Today we are talking about India, the destination that I'm from, and I'm very excited to welcome Shane over here, who's from New Zealand. A very warm welcome to you, Shane. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Shane visited India and he's going to tell us about his trip. Where did he go? What did he do when he was here? But before we do that, we'd like to know you a little bit more, Shane. Please tell us about where you're from, what do you do, and how did you plan your trip to India?
I'll give you a quick summary of myself. I'm originally from Australia, about an hour and a half north of Sydney. I spent the last 15 years traveling around the world, and I've lived all over the place. I've lived in Canada, I've lived in South America, I lived in Germany and Europe for quite a couple of years. I met my fiancée Miranda, who you'll see in our photographs. If you check out our Instagram and YouTube, all that sort of stuff, she's very much present with a lot of our stuff. I met her in Germany, but she's originally from the USA. We met in 2018 and decided that we were going to move the following year to New Zealand together. And we've been here since 2018, so that's 6 years now, just over 6 years.
Wow. So how did you decide for New Zealand? Because both of you were from very different
Yeah, different places. For me, this was the compromise to moving a little closer to home. Originally being from Australia, it's only a 3-hour flight. For her, it was a new opportunity to check out a new place. We'd lived in the city of Munich in the south of Germany, and she'd been there for about 6 years. For her, it was time to try something different. The intention was to come here for a couple of years, see if we liked New Zealand, and then decide whether or not we were going to stay, move on maybe to Australia or somewhere else. And I think it was the 2 years we stayed here, and then once the pandemic hit, 2020, we were in New Zealand for that 2 years while that happened, and we made a lot of good friends, had good connections, and fell in love with the place. Beautiful place.
So when was this? When did you do the South Asia trip?
We left in July and got back mid-November. So when we started in July, we did a couple of days in Singapore, a week in the Maldives, and then we went 2 weeks in Sri Lanka, and then we were about a month in India. So we pretty much we started in Mumbai, and then from Mumbai we went up to the north, we went up to Delhi, we went to Agra, we went up through Rajasthan, and then we flew down to the south and did Kerala, we went to Goa, we went to a few of the states down in the south there, and we went up and did Nepal and Bhutan, and then came back down and did Punjab, and we went out to Rishikesh, and then we went out to the Jim Corbett National Park. So I think that was the post you may have seen that you contacted me through.
Yeah, that's right. It was the Jim Corbett ones that first came into my radar.
That was the last thing we did in India, so it was a good quarter step. After that, we went to Japan a few days and back here.
So it was a very long trip, and India was a base to visit neighboring states.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's
So
so central, and it's the largest country there, so we were going back and forth between India and some of the other countries.
yeah, and India is quite big. To cover it also requires a lot of moving around. All of the states are different from each other as well.
Definitely. I think in total we spent about 6 to 7 weeks in India.
That is a good time to explore these various parts.
Oh, you could definitely do more. It's actually my second trip to India. I was in India in 2000 and did a couple of the biggest spots, the Taj Mahal, a little bit of Rajasthan, and I spent a tiny bit of time in Kerala. So it was my intention to go back one day, and Miranda, my fiancée, she'd never been to India. When we started putting together this trip, the two of us were coming together and really planning out what places we wanted to see, what places hadn't I been, and what places did I think were the highlights that she could come and I could revisit.
We'll get to discussing exactly what you did and where all did you go in just a bit. But before that, if I ask you about what were your expectations before you went and how did this trip meet up to those? What was it? The India of your expectations and the reality?
Sure. I guess coming from outside of South Asia, your expectations are always going to be different to what you feel. Being someone who'd been to India before, I had somewhat of an expectation. I could say say probably for Miranda, definitely very different. We have a understanding of the feel, things like haggling and markets. Here in New Zealand, the USA, where Miranda's from, or Australia, or even parts of Europe, that sort of culture is very different from us. So to arrive in a place where they may not have seen Westerners ever, or they may not have seen Westerners a long time and have them all come up, it can be a little overwhelming at times. But also, as well, there's some sort of genuine authenticity to it. If you can open yourself to that and say, these people, they're just really excited, and you can accept that, then it's endearing in a way. It's especially when you see kids come up and they want to get photographs with myself and Miranda. I put a couple of nice little photographs in there of Miranda with some families and kids, and it's something you would never see here, because to approach someone that you didn't know and ask for a photograph would be a little strange. So culturally, there is a difference. If you don't have those expectations, it can be confronting. But I think the best thing is to have that open mind and realize that everything there is because everyone is so authentic to themselves, and they're really excited to see. We did not meet one person that I could say was not friendly in any way. Like, there might be salesy, especially in markets, and very pushy, but I think everyone had a genuine intention, which was cool. It's good in Western countries. People go about their day without interacting with each other. There's something different.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like people over here are quite invested in everyone around. It's quite
Oh, yeah.
a people culture for sure.
It was interesting. Like I said, I had some expectations because I'd been to India before. For Miranda, it was, I think at first a bit of a shock, and then by the end of it, she was just used to it. She was used to having people approaching her on the streets and stuff, like,
Yeah, I think
it's,
that's quite rightly put, that it might take a little getting used
oh, of
to
course,
because
yeah.
it's a little different and
Mhm.
like not something you might have experienced elsewhere.
No, not at all. But no, it's cool. It's part of the charm. India is unique. There's nowhere else like India.
If I ask you now, if you have to tell someone else from the West and they're
Uh,
thinking about it, what would you tell them? Why should they go to India?
Look, I would have different advice for different people, and it always really depends on their experience with travel and what their expectations would be to begin with. I mentioned earlier that I was a travel agent for about 8 years. I used to manage a travel agency in Australia. It's always about qualifying the person first and finding out their expectations on why do they want to go to India, why are they interested in the first place. If it's history and culture and food and things like that, I could give individual recommendations. It depends on the person. It's hard to say
Okay.
what I would give general thing, but there is a lot of different bits of advice I could give for sure.
Yeah. I understand. It's a little difficult to say because as a country in itself, it's also quite diverse and it has a wide
100%.
like sort of
Yeah.
things to offer. It
Yeah.
might, yeah, depending upon the personality of the traveler and what they're looking for and which
Yeah.
part of India they want to explore, you would advise them differently.
100%. Yeah. I think a lot of people that go to India, they generally do a little bit of research to begin with. They know a little bit about what they're in for, which I highly recommend. Know why you're going there. If you want to relax on the beach, Goa is a great place. If you're into history and culture, you want to see palaces, fortresses, the Taj Mahal, Agra, Rajasthan, and all those sorts of places. So when it comes to locations, I could give recommendations on places, but what to expect when it comes to the culture of India, for Westerners, it could be a big culture shock. For first time travelers, they might find the amount of people confronting. It's the world's largest population. So they may find being in a place, in a crowded marketplace where you literally can't move because you're trying to get through to the next stall. That's something that we don't see. Like, for example, for myself, we live in New Zealand. The whole country's population is 5.5 million. So I can drive several hours and not see a person.
Yeah, it's probably just a big city in India.
Much, yeah, all condensed in sport. So you've got to have that expectation, and with cities in general, you're going to get all sorts of different kinds of people. You're going to see things that are a little bit different to what we have here. It can be a little confronting, especially, not that I want to touch too much on this, but if there's poverty and things like that as well, you will see everything. You'll see wealth, you'll see poverty, you'll see lots of people, but you'll also see beauty and you'll see a lot of history. Be open to that, especially in the cities. And in the cities, they can have this huge range of different sorts of feelings.
That's quite right. So coming down to your itinerary, you started off down south, is that right?
We started in Mumbai, so we did a few days in Mumbai, and we did a couple of nice little guided tours in Mumbai. We went out to the Elephanta Caves in Mumbai, which were really nice. We did some street food tours, which were great because for us, we're huge food lovers. That was one of the big reasons to come to India as well, is because personally I love Indian food and we wanted to check out some of the food that the local people eat, which is cool. It's definitely helped us a lot. First stop in India, it was our first or second day we did the street food tour. That gave us an idea of what street food is like throughout India, what we're looking for, the pani puri and the pav bhaji and all those sorts of things to really understand that side of things. We also did a sightseeing trip around Mumbai, which gave us a lot of history and background, and we spent an extra day just exploring some little bits on our own, which is nice once we had that foundation. From Mumbai, we flew up to Delhi on India Independence Day. We arrived in Delhi, and I remember people on motorcycles and tuk-tuks with flags waving. I think it was the first afternoon we'd arrived in Delhi, and we went up into the rooftop to have dinner, and it was around sunset or just after, I can't remember what time, but we went up into the rooftop and there were fireworks going off and kites being flown in the air, and that was cool. I remember even on the plane they gave us these little dessert treats, and the dessert, I don't remember what sort of dessert it was, but it was the color of the Indian flags, and it said Happy Independence Day. So that was kind of cool.
That's quite a part of our celebrations, including
cool.
the tricolor in like a lot of different things.
No, it's interesting because India as a country itself is a recent country, even though its history goes back a long way. But to see that sense of nationalism, it's nice, and to understand the history of what India had to go to get that independence, it's inspiring as well, which is cool.
Yeah. So you landed in Delhi, which is where all the Independence Day celebrations happen
Yeah,
on the day of
yeah.
independence.
Problem is, we arrived too late to actually do anything. We wanted to go to the gate and see the ceremonies, but that had already happened by the time we arrived. We saw a lot of celebrations from the airport to the hotel, and then obviously what I was describing before in the evening. But I guess one of the things I kind of wish we planned better is if we got there a little bit earlier and we were able to do that sort of thing. But I suppose when
But
you're
there are
planning
a
a
lot of
4 month,
on that day, like with all the ceremonies that they're going on, there are a lot of security restrictions around that area as
sure,
well. So it
yeah,
would have been
it
probably
probably
been difficult for you to get through
yeah,
as well.
yeah, true,
Like
true.
people over here plan like a lot in advance to get
Yep.
tickets to be able to attend it.
So even if we got there earlier, it probably would have been difficult to figure out things anyway. Yeah. But it was very cool though. In Delhi, we did all the highlights of Delhi, Old Delhi, New Delhi. We visited a lot of the historic sites. We went to a lot of the markets as well there. Yeah, Delhi was cool. I'd been to Delhi before. So Qutb Minar, we went to Humayun's tomb. Yeah, a lot of the big sites as well that were all through there. Delhi was a cool place to visit. We got on a train. We did an overnight train to Bikaner, and so we went to the Bikaner Palace. We didn't really spend a long time in Bikaner. I think it was just 2 nights there, so that was cool to see that. And then, what was that? Sorry.
Bikaner is the name of the
Yeah,
place.
Bikaner. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bikaner. Bikaner. That's the one. Yeah. So we went to Bikaner and we tried a lot of those snacks and stuff like that, and the Bikaner Palace as well. And then we did an overnight train out to Jaisalmer. So those 2 stops were places I didn't visit my original trip to India. I didn't get a chance to go to Jaisalmer, even though I'd been to Rajasthan. Jaisalmer turned out to be one of my favorite places, and I think Miranda agrees as well. We've discussed this, and just the feel of Jaisalmer, it feels like you're inside of this giant, I don't know, like a sandcastle or something like that. We stayed in the old city centre and explored the beautiful Havelis and things like that outside of Jaisalmer. We even dressed up one night and wore some traditional clothes. Well, at least Miranda dressed up nice. I realised later on that the clothes that I got for dressing up had hamburgers and hot dogs or something on it. It's a bizarre photograph. We really loved Jaisalmer. We went out to the Thar Desert overnight, which was really nice. We were with a small group at this point, so we did a small, I think it was like a 1.5 week or maybe it's 2 week trip with Intrepid. So they're like one of those grassroots adventure style trips where you can go out and do a few different places with a small group. So we got to see some of those sort of smaller places, which was cool. From Jaisalmer, we went to Jodhpur, the Blue City. I'd been to Jodhpur before, which is beautiful. I wish we had a bit longer. We had 3 or 4 nights in Jaisalmer, which felt really good. It was a good amount of time in Jaisalmer. We ticked off everything we wanted to see, but Jodhpur we'd only, and I feel like there was definitely time to spend at least another night because there's so much to explore. We got to see the fortress in Jodhpur and explore a bit of the Blue City. We went to a place in the center of town that did probably the best samosas that I had on my whole trip in India. I can't remember what they call them, but they had these deep fried chilies as well, like battered chilies, and they were delicious. So that was a really cool part of the trip. And then we headed down to the must-do on every Rajasthan list, which is Udaipur, of course, the beautiful city on the lake. It was stunning. Udaipur is one of my favorite places in India in total. It's such a beautiful. We did all the main sites. We went on a boat and we went out via the floating Taj Palace and went and stayed on the, not stayed, but we went and had chai on one of the little islands right across from the floating palace, which was nice. And then we did a cooking class, so that was really cool to learn how to cook the local food. And it was more the type of food that locals eat as opposed to like Indian style cuisine. I'm just trying to think what sort of foods we were making, but we were making things just like dal and some basic stuff like that, chapatis, how to hand make chapatis. It was really cool.
Did you like the food?
I love the food. Even here in New Zealand, I'll cook Indian food. I grew up in a household where my mum was a chef, so for me growing up, eating different styles of food from all over the world every night was a normal thing. One night we'd do Thai curry, the next Indian food or a Mexican meal or something like that. And it's funny because we live in a household now, we have people from all over the world living here, a British person and an Indian girl from Mumbai and a French girl. French girl came out yesterday and she's, what are you guys cooking? Is that Mexican? How are you making Mexican food? You're not from Mexico. And I'm like, we travel a lot. We love food from around the world. One of the top things we love to do when we travel is not only find the best food, but also learn how to make it a little bit. So when we go home, we have some skills to make it ourselves.
You remember the place by eating the food later on?
100%. You do. Memories can come in the forms of thoughts, they can come in the forms of smells and tastes. Sometimes when you eat something that you may have eaten in a place, it'll transform you back. It's really cool. Shall I continue with our itinerary?
Yeah, after Udaipur.
After Udaipur, we went to Pushkar. This was my second time in Pushkar, famous for their camel festival. It's also a very holy city. We did a hike up to a temple. It was beautiful, the hike. It goes up to a temple on a hill and it just had fantastic views of Pushkar. So we were confronted with a lot of langur monkeys. They were everywhere on the steps, jumping all over the place, jumping on the people as well. People would be walking up and down the steps, eating food, and just be all over the place. I think Pushkar was probably the place where we had more people wanting to get our photographs than any other place that I had been to, especially doing that hike up to the temple, because I guess a lot of the people that had come there to Pushkar had come from very small villages and they weren't used to seeing Westerners. So there were points when we were coming down from that hike where we have 20 or 30 people coming up and asking for photographs, which normally we don't mind if it's just one or two people, especially families and kids and things like that. It's nice. But when it starts to get to those numbers, it's like, all right, guys, we got to get going. It felt like paparazzi almost. No one had any ill intentions. Everyone was just being honest and they were just excited to see us. So you got to sometimes take that which you see from your perspective can be frustrating and see it from their perspective. It's really exciting. It would be like if, I don't know, we saw Tom Cruise walking down the street or some sort of celebrity. So I was trying to put myself in their shoes. It was an interesting time. I really like Pushkar. The markets are beautiful. The lake is nice as well. It's a very interesting and unique place. From there, we went to Jaipur, the capital of Rajasthan, and Jaipur was really cool. We really enjoyed Jaipur. We went to watch a Bollywood film, actually, while we were in Jaipur at one of the famous cinemas there. I hadn't been to a Bollywood film in a cinema, and this was one place where I saw a huge cultural difference between the Western countries and India. The cinema was beautiful, really big, grand, old. It's one of the most famous in the country, right?
Yeah.
And it was all in, I think it was in Hindi. I don't think it was in Marathi. It was in Hindi. But I think when we were watching it, we didn't really understand anything because there were no subtitles, and some of the jokes were, you could get them because they were slapstick style humor and things like that. But there was a lot of back and forth with the people in the crowd. When the songs were coming on, we could see people dancing in the cinema. When the jokes would come out, people would yell out things and stuff. And in a Western cinema, it's always, don't talk. Obviously, if there's a joke, you laugh. But to see
Hmm.
people standing up and getting into things. It was different. It was cool to go there for the atmosphere as a Westerner to see how other people enjoy the cinema. I think that was cool. We
Yeah.
enjoyed
I think
Jaipur.
I think watching a Bollywood movie, especially in a theater, is more of a community experience rather than
Yeah,
individual watching. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and that's what we really liked about it, that it was a
Hmm.
communal thing rather than just go to the cinema and tune out from the rest of the world. There's no connect with each other. I don't know if that works with Western cinema because there's not so much singing and dancing involved and
Yeah.
lets you maybe go to watch a musical. It was unique. I found that cool.
Do you remember the name of the movies?
It was a comedy horror film.
Or was it three?
Yes, that was the one. That was what we saw. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was like number two or something like that. It was a
Yeah,
sequel.
part two. Yeah, that
Yeah.
recently, yeah, it came out this year.
Yeah, so the interesting thing was we didn't know it was a sequel, so we're going in and there was already part of the story that had been told. These people knew each other, there was some history and stuff, but for us who'd never seen it, it was like, who are these guys? How do they know each other? Who's that ghost girl? We had none of the background that I guess the rest of the crowd knew, which was interesting. In Jaipur, we did pretty much everything that the regular tourists see. We did the Amber Fort, the city centre, the Palace of the Winds as well, which is really beautiful. We went through some of the markets. Jaipur is interesting. It's very busy. I remember Jaipur being one of the first times it was really noisy. I know parts of Mumbai felt really like that as well, but it was really noisy in Jaipur. That's something we're not used to in the West. That's probably some advice I could give to someone from a Western country that's not used to that stuff. Be prepared to hear a lot of horn. In New Zealand, for example, if you beep a horn at someone, it's considered like a real offense. So
Hmm.
when people are beeping horns around us, I'm feeling like I'm being attacked by people. I'm looking around and then I realize, no, they're just going around the truck or whatever. But for us, it's a big deal. People beat the horns that come out of the shops. I remember that in Jaipur. That was one of the things I do remember there. So that's probably some advice I could give to people from Western countries going to India for the first time is just be prepared. It's a little noisy. We stopped at a place called Abhaneri. I hadn't really done much research on before. I think because this was still part of our intrepid little trip itinerary through Rajasthan. I don't think this was something that they had originally put on the itinerary, so we hadn't done any research on this. Normally, we research everywhere we go. The Abhaneri is famous for one thing, and I believe it has the largest or one of the largest stepwells in either Rajasthan or in India in general, and that stepwell was quite impressive. But
Hmm.
that was like a little stopover at Abhaneri on the way to Agra. We went to Agra after that and we did quite a few things. So on the way to Agra, I'm just bringing up our itinerary now. Oh yeah, Fatehpur Sikri. That's where we went to. We went up to Fatehpur Sikri, which is something that I had done on my previous trip to India as well,
Hmm.
which was cool. So that was an interesting place, and I'm a huge fan of history. If anyone watches my YouTube channel, one of the things I really get into is the history of places. I don't think I even mentioned this yet, but I'm actually a tour guide in New Zealand. So for me, history and culture and explaining it to people, that's a big thing for me. And I found the history of Fatehpur Sikri was quite interesting too, because it was one of the Maharajas who had built up this city in a place where he was told by some sort of priest that his wife would have a child or a male child or something like that. And because that priest was from this place, they built a city there. But what they didn't realize is this city is in an area that is prone to droughts. And within a few years of them building up this whole city, the place went into a drought and everyone had to leave. So they abandoned the city, which I found like really fascinating. So that was a cool place to check out. Um, Obviously in Agra, you've got to see one of the wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal. So we saw the Taj Mahal, of course. We did that for sunrise, which I highly recommend doing. It's
Hmm.
probably a little bit of a cliche by now. Everyone goes for sunrise.
Hmm.
Getting the beautiful colors in the sky reflecting on the white marble of the Taj Mahal, makes for amazing videos and photos. So for us, that was cool. Of course, we did the Red Fortress as well in Agra, which I think is a must do. I know there's a Red Fortress in Delhi also, but I think it's pretty well known among travelers. If you're only going to do one of the Red Fortresses, the one in Agra is the bigger one, the more famous one to see.
That's pretty great. So that wraps up the first part of Shane's amazing journey. We have explored the vibrant culture and rich history of Mumbai, Rajasthan, and Agra. But the adventure does not stop here. In the next part, we'll find out what Shane did in the spiritual hubs of Varanasi and Rishikesh, the serene backwaters of Kerala, and the wild landscapes of Jim Corbett National Park. Stay tuned and don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your fellow travel lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable travel stories. See you in the next part.